group chats, group dialogue, group conversations, groups in general. Once you add one voice and then another and another and another, how do we keep track of this? Well, if you've ever struggled to keep a group scene clear and interesting, I assure you, you are not alone. And I want to show you some ways on how to avoid confusion and bring your character's voice to life amongst the gathering of many people. Okay, so today we're going to talk about avoiding the chaos. Okay, techniques for writing multi character conversations. It's easy when it's one person thinking, it's a little harder for two. But once you add a third, a fourth, a fifth, even a sixth, or sometimes you're around an entire hall with the king, maybe the queen, and the entire procession of people, it gets a little difficult. Okay, so we're going to work on that today. But Thomas, what defines a group conversation in writing? A group conversation in writing is any scene where three or more characters interact through the dialogue. Unlike one-on-one exchanges, group conversations bring complexity because there are multiple personalities, perspectives, positions, and potential conflicts that are all converging at once. This type of conversation is defined by its dynamic nature. Multiple voices are contributing, characters may talk over one another, alliances can shift within the blink of a sentence, and there are often different motivations and positions at play. The key to defining and managing a group conversation is ensuring clarity so readers can easily follow who is speaking, why they are involved, and what each character wants to achieve in the interaction. What makes group conversations challenging and how to overcome it? It's not too far-fetched to believe that group conversations in stories can often be challenging to write without confusing readers or losing their interest. Many multiple characters are speaking. It's easy for dialogue to become tangled or for the reader to lose track of who is talking and why they even are there. Let alone, are they still there? Did they vanish? Are they on the page? The goal of group dialogue is to ensure each character's voice is distinct, their actions speak clearly, and the purpose of the conversation remains engaging. There's a rule, all right? Now, we are talking about novels, but this rule in screenwriting also works with novels. Every character you put on the page has to be paid for that day. So there's a budget. Now, why am I saying this? Because when I talk about novels, novels have word budgets. Okay. And if you're writing a novel that you're trying to write within 90,000 words, just placing somebody in that scene adds to the word budget. So in screenwriting, when you're writing a script and a character is on the page, even if they say nothing, it increases the budget because they are paid for the day. But now we also know that we have to give them camera coverage. So there's a setup. So now that increases the time we will utilize on that scene. When you're writing a group scene, your budget increases because you have to remind people, the reader, that this character exists. Now, let's say, but Tom, I want them there because they're a part of a group, but I don't really need them to be there. The thing is, if anyone is there, their presence must at all times feel felt. Not that they have to be like, look at me. It's just why have them there in the first place. But it also can get confusing. Who left, who stayed. So you always want to have clear intentions. But why am I bringing this up? Because sometimes you have to say to yourself, does this character need to be there? And if they do, I know that I have to contribute X amount of word budget to them at minimum to allow them to be present on the page. Even if they have no say in anything, they still must be present on the page. All right. With that said, though, you want to assign motivations to the characters that are there, whether they say something or not, because the motivations to stay silent is as important as the motivations to speak. So each character needs a clear motivation for being in the conversation, let alone when I say being in the conversation, I don't just mean that they are talking. Again, if they are present, What is their motivation to not say anything? And what are they absorbing? And what are they reacting to? What is it about the conversation that is interesting to them? All right. This not only drives their dialogue, but also helps the reader understand why they are involved, which prevents the scene from feeling aimless or confusing. Because again, remember the word count, your word budget. Every line, dialogue, and narrative must contribute to one or more of these elements: plot, character, or world building. They could do one of those, two of those, or three of them in one sentence. This includes dialogue. Dialogue has to move the conversation forward, either by propelling the plot, allowing the character to exist and develop. And developing a character means that we learn their positions are challenged, we see their behavior, we understand their motivation, anything we learn about them. So, if I'm in a conversation with you and I say something like, somebody says, the Mets are the greatest team in the world. And I go, well, growing up on Long Island, I'd have to say you're crazy, because the Yankees are the greatest team in the world. That is character development. You learn a position. My position is that the Yankees are the greatest team in the world, and I am a Yankees fan, and the Mets suck. All right, so those are technically two positions, right? You learn that I live on Long Island or grew up on Long Island, from Long Island. So that is character development. It's also world building, because we now know it takes place in the real world, the story. Now, if they said, hey, who wants to go to the baseball game this week? The Mets are playing and they're the greatest team ever. And then I go, the Mets are not from Long Island. I would have to say, you are stupid. The Mets are not. Yankees are the best. And then they're like, well, you don't want to go? Well, now there's plot involved, because we're trying, are we going or are we not going? Are we going to the game or are we not going? All right. The other thing is, you want to use action cues. All right. Use physical actions, gestures, or so how I talk, hey, you, sir. All right. That's just because I think it's because I'm Sicilian, and it's just part of, if I sit on my hands, they say I go silent. So you want to use physical actions, gestures, or even shifts in focus to indicate who is speaking. This will help break up the dialogue and keep the reader visually engaged without relying too heavily on repetitive he said, she said, Thomas whispered. But also, if it is zero dialogue, but they are reacting, that's important too. You can use behavior to speak. So you don't have to always write dialogue. You could have somebody adjusting things or moving, or maybe, they drag the chair across the floor. That old gimmick where it's they sit down, get comfortable, and then they say their line. That, I'm not saying do that, because it's very funny. It's a very funny gag, but it's been used. Anyway, common pitfalls: too many similar voices. Be careful that it is not a room full of singular positions and singular motivations. One of the most common pitfalls in group conversation is that characters sound too similar, making it difficult for readers to distinguish who is speaking. What does this mean, though? It means that if I believe the Yankees are the best team, and I'm like, yeah, I grew up with them, they're great. And then the next person's like, yeah, the Yankees are the best. They were my family's favorite team. And then the third person is like, yes, we would go to the Yankee game all the time. Me, my mom, my dad, my brothers and sisters, we love the Yankees. None of us have a unique voice yet. What makes a unique voice? Well, it's not just the words they use, which can help. It's their position on subjects. It's why I like the Yankees. So if I like the Yankees because it reminds me of my family and we used to go to the games all the time, these two other characters should like the Yankees for different reasons. Can they like them for the same reason? Sure. Let's say they do. Now you have to find another position that might not necessarily connect with the other characters. Another thing is their vocabulary choice and the style in which they speak. Okay? For example, let's say we all love the Yankees because it reminds us of our family. Character one, mine goes, Yankees, yeah, Yankees are number one. Oh, why do you like the Yankees? Family. The family shit. It's the family stuff. And the second person goes, "Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I love that I got to spend time with my parents, because it was how they found each other and fell in love. It was beautiful. That's why we go to the ball games, everything. Oh, that's great. It's nice to see that you're enjoying that. All right. What is going on? Well, one character is more reserved. One character isn't saying a lot. They are their choice. They're not allowing vulnerability. They're not going too deep. The other one is like letting it all out. And then the third person might say, yeah, speaking of, I actually have to take my wife. Well, I don't have to. I'm choosing to take my wife and kids to the ball game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Do you guys want to come? All right. So there are technically different ways, different positions that they are expressing themselves. So that is how you start creating voices. All right. But more importantly, it's easier when you make sure that that's the other thing. Like a scene can become boring and dull if it's like, hey, we gotta go get the blah 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 to destroy blah blah blah, right? And the other person's like, absolutely, we should go get the blah 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 sword so we could destroy blah blah blah. And then the third person's like, yes, I've been waiting for us to figure out a solution, and this blah 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 sword will definitely help us with killing blah blah blah. And then the fourth person's like, absolutely. When we get the sword, the blah 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 sword, I want to wield it when striking down blah blah blah. And they're like, all right, let's go. That scene loses something. It becomes dull. It's not interesting. And the reason is because no one's challenging anyone. No one has different perspectives. No one's like, wait a minute. Should we really go after this sword? Should we? Has anyone ever actually seen this sword? You know what I'm saying? Like you have to create. Yes, they're going to go. Plot dictates that they have to go get the sword, the blah 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 sword, right? Because they need to kill blah blah blah. Plot dictates that has to happen. Story is how it unfolds through the pushback, the negate, them saying nay or yay. Maybe they're like, could we try something else? And they're like, all right, let's try something else. And that fails. And they're like, I guess we have to go after the blah, blah, blah sword. Because remember, a narrative is made up of both plot and story. Plot is what needs to happen no matter what. And story is how it unfolds through the emotional experiences and choices of a character. The emotional experiences and choices is how they respond, their behavior towards things being challenged or things coming up. It's their positions, etc. All right. So keep that in mind. Additionally, characters need to have purpose in that conversation. Okay. So each character should have a reason to even be there. Okay. Not because you want them there. They need to be there for purpose. Because again, word count budget. What are you willing to spend your budget on? Okay, so understanding this helps direct their contributions and makes dialogue purposeful rather than random. Understanding where characters align will help with their dialogue, reinforce their intentions, and keep things flowing. If you establish specific goals before writing a group conversation, it'll help you determine which character wants what and which characters need to achieve this or that. And this will help you keep your dialogue focused and prevent aimless interactions. Because if you just go in, you're like, let's see where this goes, that's fine. But you still need to know what is this conversation about at minimum. You don't need to know the exact specifics, but you go, all right, they have to agree on getting the blah 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 sword. So when you're writing it, you need to understand their personality. You go, who might be more afraid? Who is like, I don't care what we have to get. Let's just get it and get it done because we have to take care of this person so I can go on vacation. I need to go to Aruba. Right. And then someone is the mind of logic and reason. And somebody is like, all gun ho. I'm whatever you guys want to do, I'm in. Right. But you have to create some sort of position for each person. Okay. That helps the motivations. The other thing is remember that use dialogue as a reflection of motivation, right? So each line spoken by a character should subtly reflect their goals, whether through their word choice, tone, or level of engagement. This will add depth to make their motivations more apparent. Additionally, Remember, uh, it's what they say and don't say. It's what they do and don't do. That creates the behavior, that creates clarity. And also having that what they say and don't say, do and don't do, it allows you to again place some word count onto who they are, what they are, and that they are actually there and creates presence. Okay. A common pitfall, lack of clarity. Common pitfall is including characters in a conversation without clear reason for their presence. Just, I want them there. They need to be there. They're a part of the group. This can lead to confusion or purposeless dialogue. So make sure that each character contributes something and not just, hey guys, I brought the drinks. All right. Using action cues in group conversations. You know, if you've watched a lot of my dialogue videos and you've watched my videos in general on this channel, I love moving characters. I love behavior. And the behavior helps me eliminate a lot of he said, she said, Thomas whispered. But you can also use cues that are more than just dialogue tags. So consider actions, gestures. He rested his hand. He stroked his goatee. He stroked his. You could even get descriptive. He stroked his grayish brown goatee or his gray brown he stroked his brown goatee filtered with grays. All right, you don't even have to say ponders. It's just getting there. Each word safe on his lips, buying his time, waiting for the appropriate moment. Okay. Now, this technique not only adds variety, but also makes the group interaction feel active and alive. Instead of saying John said for the fifth time, you could describe John's reaction or how he shifts his posture before speaking, letting his actions convey more than his feelings. I really think we should get the blah, blah, blah sword. No one has even ever really truly laid eyes on it. There's no way this thing is real. All that can have been written. John closed his eyes, releasing a long sigh as he shifted his weight. Shifted his weight to his elbow on the table and covered his mouth. Covered his mouth, letting the words radiate through him. He leaned forward, his arms stretched out, his two fingers pointing across to Mike. No one has ever heard or seen this sword. How do we know it's real? That creates a good beat and a movement. Of course, I'm obviously just doing it off the top of my head. All right. So you want to incorporate physical descriptions to allow body movement and behavior to emulate emotions. So you're not always using dialogue as a face value. Because remember, subtext. A good thing to do is also mix dialogue with actions. Be wary of he said, she said 17 times in a row. You could probably get away with never saying he said, she said. However, it does help with creating beat and rhythm. For example, if you're mixing dialogue, instead of relying solely on dialogue tags, you could just have a reinforcement like cross their arms, leaning forward, leaning in, leaning back, glancing away, etc., etc. Common pitfall is overusing physical descriptions as well, which can clutter the scene and slow down the pace. Remember, pace is the speed at which information is presented to the reader, and this includes everything from plot, or I should say exposition to description to dialogue to narrative to action, right? So you have to say to yourself, okay, do I need to slow this down? Did something get said that needs a moment for the reader to take in? If so, now I can take a minute and allow a character to sort of settle into their position and then respond. If it's not, then I could just get right into it. Okay. We need to get the sword of blah, blah, blah. We do not need to get the sword of blah, blah, blah. There has to be a different way. Well, why do you think there has to be a different way? Well, because A, no one has ever come back from the sword of blah, blah, blah. Now let it breathe. John leaned back with a long sigh, closing his eye, leaning his weight onto his elbow to the table. Because he's now listening. That particular line, no one has ever returned. Let that sink into the reader. Okay, because that creates stakes. All right. And finally, before we go into an example, using rhythm in group conversation. All right, think about rhythm within a group conversation. That conversations can easily overwhelm if everybody talks at the once and there are too many similar, said this earlier, voices in the mix. Use moments of silence, pauses, or character reactions to literally break up the flow. These moments are powerful because they give the reader time to digest. And then they also let quieter characters have their weight in the conversation, emphasizing that silence can be as powerful as words. And this means that tip one, you want to incorporate pauses and silence deliberately. Include pauses in the dialogue to let key moments land and give characters time to react. The other thing is, you might also want to highlight reactions to silence. So if a character doesn't respond to a question, then there is a reaction to that silence, such as uncomfortable shifting, thoughtful expressions, or taking deep breaths to add depth and key. Now, what is a common pitfall? Overcrowded dialogue. A common pitfall is having all characters speak too frequently without breaks. This can make the conversation feel way overwhelming. Okay, so let's do one of these. Let's do one of these. Share. Oh, yeah. All right. So you want to, I just have the 9 things up there, okay? Assign motivations, use action cues, establish specific goals, use dialogue as reflection of motivation. What else? Oh, wait, let's go in here. Okay. Incorporate physical descriptions, mix dialogue with actions, incorporate pauses and silence, highlight reactions and silence, and of course, buy me pizza. I may have added that one. All right. So a couple of things. To get the blah blah sword. All right. We do. Yes, we need it to kill bloop. All right, I'm doing a crappy version so we can expand it from there. Can I shrink this a little bit? I'm gonna shrink this a little bit. And can you still see that? Does that feel good to you? Yeah. If you actually full screen, it looks even nicer. All right. We need to get the blah blah sword. We do. Yes, we need it to kill bloop bloop. Right on, Jimmy. To getting here to getting the blah blah sword. Boop. Fun fact, my cat is in the process of doing her famous blah blah throw up. She loves doing it though. She loves doing it. I clean it up. It takes 2 seconds. All right. And then of course let's get I'm in if you're all in. Okay, so a couple of things. Motivations. It sounds like everybody's on board to do that. Nothing interesting happens with that. Okay. We have no action cues, so it's just dialogue back and forth. Okay. There's no reflection of motivations. Okay. We didn't incorporate any physical descriptions. We didn't mix any dialogue with actions. We didn't incorporate pauses. But more importantly, there's no tags, no nothing. We don't know who's talking. So let's do it up. We need to get the blah 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 sword. John. Dave said. Okay. We do. Cheered Chris. Now, obviously, we're going to change this up. I'm just showing you. Yes, we need it to kill bloop bloop, said Jimmy. All right, right in, right on, Jimmy. Here to getting the blah 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 sword. Bob said. Okay. By the way, you can go backwards. You know that, right? You could say Dave said, Bob, and you could say said Bob. You can change that too. You know. I'm in if you're in. Richard said with a. Richard said, smiling. Look, I just saved word count. See what I did there? Said with a smile. Okay. I just took 2 words away, and that saved my word budget by said smiling. Because sometimes you don't have to add certain things. All right. So let's assign motivations. Okay. We need to get the blah 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 sword. So if I'm down here, all right, Dave's motivations. Dave equals. Okay. We need the sword. Okay. Motivations, positions. They're the same thing, by the way. Position is like somebody's emotional stake in the thing. Are they afraid? Are they confident? Like that kind of stuff. Positions are what they like or don't like. Like I like, if I say I like the Yankees, that becomes a position. If I choose beef stew over, say, a hamburger, I've just created a position that I like beef stew. Okay. I'm not saying my position is I like beef stew more than hamburgers, but my behavior has just established a position. Now, if I do that 2 or 3 times in a book, and then by the 4th time they don't have beef stew, and I'm like, I guess what else do you got? And then they're like, well, we have a hamburger, and they're like, all right, it's meat. So now we're establishing that the position is I like meat, and all right, I'll take a hamburger, but beef stew is definitely my go-to meal. And we challenged it a little bit. We made me have to make another choice. Anyway, so Dave equals we, not B. We need the sword. I know, baby. I know. Come on. Come on. You want to hang out with Daddy? Come here. Come on. You know you can come in. You're allowed in here. Come on. Who's your good girl? All right. So then we have Chris. And then we have Jimmy. We have Bob. Now, obviously, this is a huge group. Richard. Hey, baby. No, Daddy loves you. Sorry, we're an animal-friendly channel here, so animals come first. I know humans are animals too, but my cat or dog have never let me down. All right, so let's see. Now, we need the sword. Now, I want Chris to be more like there needs to be another way. Now, you see, like motivations don't have to be too complex or crazy. Jimmy agrees with Chris, but thinks we should have a plan for getting the blah blah sword as a plan B. Now, that's a little bit more complex because it's obviously it has a two-parter to it. They agree with Chris, but they believe they should have a plan B to get blah 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 in case the other way doesn't work out. So they want to be more practical, right? They want to have their T's crossed and I's run. Bob just wants to go home to his kids. All right. But he knows this has to be done. All right. And then, of course, Richard. All right. Richard doesn't care what they do, just that they pick something because he wants to get out there and do it, do something already. So he's just like, come on, people. All right. So with that, we know this is Dave's position. We need to get the blah blah sword. Dave stepped to the table in the middle of the large tavern. slamming his broadsword down. Slamming his horse satchel. Spelt that wrong. Down. Remember, all great writers have great editors. All right. Or spell check. All right. Dave stepped to the table in the middle of a large tavern, slamming his horse satchel down. Dave stepped to the table, slamming his horse satchel down. Now these are good. All right. So, by the way, if you've not watched the prose, writing the prose, I talk about this is movement. So the first thing that we set up is Dave stepped to the table in the middle of the tavern. All right. What's he do at the table? He's basically slamming his horse satchel down. So that's how you create movement. You allow every beat to sort of move into the next beat instead of just being statements like Dave stepped to the table, he sat down. Like, you don't have to do that here. We need to get the sword, get the blah 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 sword. Now I don't need, Dave said, because there was action. All right, Chris there needs to be another way. You're still damn thing. All right. Now watch this. You're still on that damn thing. All right. Okay. Yes, Chris. I'm still on that damn thing. The thing we need to kill bloop bloop. Or this whole city is going to fall to his wrath. Obviously, I'm writing playful. It's completely playful, but I'm just showing you. All right. So I didn't have to say that the Chris said this. Yes, Chris, I'm still on that damn thing. Because we don't need a tag for this directly, because we know that Dave is just talking, but then someone responded to them, and then they're like, yes, Chris, I'm still on that damn thing. The thing we need to kill bloop bloop, or this. All right. Yeah, I'm still on this damn thing. The thing we need to kill bloop bloop, or this whole city is going to fall to his wrath. Okay. All right. Now, Jimmy agrees with Chris, but thinks we should have a plan B for getting blah blah. Okay. Now, so Jimmy is going to be like, Jimmy leans back. Let's get them all in there, crossing his arms with a laugh, leaking. Oh, a laugh. The side of his mouth. Okay. I'm with Chris. Now we don't need Jimmy said. All right. Now what about leaning back? Jimmy crossed. See, now you can start the sentence like leaning back. Jimmy crossed his arms with a laugh to the side of his mouth. I'm with Chris. Smirk. Devolved. I spelled that wrong. Devolved. Oh. Devolved to a serious look, a serious gaze across the table. It's too dangerous to go after. But if we're going to need it, we should have a plan to get it. All right. The room cheered in unison. I can't spell, 'cause spelling is without you. Unison. Oh, ha 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 ha. Okay. Okay. Minus Dave. The room cheered. Cheered in unison. Here, here. All right. Now, so we don't need this. Okay. Let's get rid of this. Boop, boop, boop. All right. So let's look at it again. So remember, Dave is like, we need the sword. Chris is like, there needs to be another way. Jimmy agrees with Chris. So before we even get to Bob, right? Dave stepped to the table in the middle of the large tavern, slamming his horse satchel down. We need to get the blah 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 sword. You're still on that damn thing. We could even do this. Chris stood up. His weight, his hands on the table. I told you, we need another way. All right. Yes. Yes. I'm still on that damn thing. This is the only way to stop Bloop Bloop, or this whole city is gonna fall to his wrath. Okay. Leaning back, Jimmy crossed his arms with a laugh to the side of his mouth. I'm with Chris. The smirk devolved into a serious gaze across the table. It's too dangerous to go after, but if we're going to need it, we should still have a plan. We should still have a plan to get it. We should still have a plan to get it. We should still. Yeah, okay. It's too dangerous to go after, but if we're going, it's too dangerous to go after, but if we need it, we should still have a plan to get it. Sorry, I had to pause and take care of the cat doing something. All right, so where we are, yeah. Yes, I'm still on that damn thing, and this is the only way to stop Bloop Bloop, or this whole city is going to fall to his wrath. Leaning back, Jimmy crossed his arms with a laugh to the side of his mouth. I'm a Chris, the smirk devolved into a serious gaze across the table. It's too dangerous to go after, but if we need it, we should still have a plan to get it. Minus Dave, the room cheered in unison. Hear, hear. The room minus Dave cheered in unison. All right. Now, let's see. We got to get Bob in here. Bob just wants to go see his kids, but he knows this has to get done. All right. Now, we're going to actually add Bob in here. Okay. All right. Slouched. By the way, here's an example of line editing. Sitting slouched in his chair. Bob glanced at them speaking. All right. So, first of all, slouched. Sitting slouched, right? So if you're doing line editing, how do you clean this up? You just slouched in his chair. Bob glanced. Slouched in his chair. Bob glanced. Slouched in his chair. Bob glanced. I think that's correct. Yeah. So So we take away. We don't have to say sitting, but slouched in his chair. Bob glanced at them speaking. Maybe. Or you could say arguing. Argue. At them, argued, glanced at them. Arguing. I spelled that right. Arguing. All right. Slouched in his chair. Bob glanced at them, arguing. Okay. So why did I do that? Because I wanna have a reaction shot of Bob. The room minus Dave cheered. Bob hung his head. Oh, this I'm gonna change this. Some of the men cheered in unison. Bob hung his head. Avoiding the glee in their voices. All right. What? What, Bob? Bab. What, Bob? What, Bob? Let's see. Think back. I'm Chris. Okay. Okay. A waiter approached. Oh, a waiter left. What is it? Is 1, 2. Oh, wait, where we go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 people. Okay. A waiter left 5 needs 5 drinks. Waiter left 5 drinks on the table. Avoiding their voice. Okay, avoiding the glee in their voices. I should do this. Oh wait, no. Oh. He glanced up. Whoa! Okay. He glanced up at a waiter. Leaving 5 drinks on the table. All right. What, Bob? All right. We could say taking a gulp of one of taking a gulp of his mead. Or you could say, oh, here you go. Yeah, taking a gulp of the mead. Chris wiped his mouth. What, Bob? I miss my kids. So, all right. So he just wants to go home to his kids, right? So you don't have to you don't have to do this. He's right. He's right, Bob. You can go home. All right, now we need a he said, right? So he's right, Bob. You can go home. All right, we could have Jimmy said, placing his hand on the man's shoulder. All right. Okay. Nah. I promised I'd be here till it was over. You have me. You have me. You have me. All right, you have me. All right. So now we need Richard. All right. Okay. All right. Richard grabbed his cup, taking down the whole of his drink in one long drawn out gulp. The liquid flowing down the side of his mouth. Everyone watched on. Everyone watched on the large man's arm flexed in the lift. All right. He slammed the cup down, breaking it on the table. Another. All right. He used he wiped the slush off his face with the length of his thick arm. Whatever we're doing, we need to do it now. All right. So, a couple things. Rich is not present in the scene, right? So we need to make Richard present in the scene. All right. Slam. We need to get the blah, blah, blah sword, right? All right. Actually, Dave stepped to the table in the middle of the tower, slamming. And we could actually, so we have a beat, he said, looking over to Richard. Silent and unmoved as usual. All right, as usual. Okay. All right. Let's look at this thing. Real quick. All right. So David stepped to the table in the middle of the large tavern, slamming his horse satchel down. We need to get the blah 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 sword, he said. Let's see. Looking over to Richard. Let's add a little bit more clarity. Who remained silent and unmoved as usual. All right. You're still on that damn thing. Chris stood up, his hands on the table. I told you we need another way, right? Let's see. Did I spell it? No, slouch in his chair. Oh, there's them arguing. All right. Slouch in his chair. Bob glanced at them arguing. Yes, I'm still on that damn thing. And this is the only way to stop Bloop Bloop, or this whole city is going to fall to his wrath. Chris lifted his arm to the bar tender. 5 fingers. Fingers raised. Oh, Chris lifted his arm to the bartender with 5 fingers raised. All right. Leaning back, Jimmy crossed his arms with a laugh to the side of his mouth. I'm with Chris. The smirk devolved into a serious gaze across the table. It's too dangerous to go after, but if we need it, we should still have a plan to get it. Some of the men cheered in unison. Hear, hear! Bob hung his head, avoiding the glee in their voices. He glanced up at the waiter, leaving 5 drinks on the table. Taking a gulp of his mead, Chris wiped his mouth. Okay, wiped his mouth. What, Bob? I miss my kids, that's all. You don't have to do this. He's right, Bob. You can go home, Jimmy said, placing his hand on the man's shoulder. Nah, I promised to be here till it was over. You have me. And now there's a long pause, and we want to kind of breathe it in. Richard grabbed his cup, taking down the whole of his drink in one long, drawn-out gulp. The liquid flowing down the side of his mouth. Everyone watched on. The large man's arm flexed in the lift. He slammed the cup down, breaking it on the table. Another! He wiped the slush off his face with the length of his thick arm. Whatever we're doing, we need to do it now. All right? So, what does that do? It helps us really Determine what's going on. So we assign motivations, and now we got to see people kind of push back and forth. We used action cues. As you can see, we didn't need, because of the flow. Taking a gulp of his mead, Chris wiped his mouth. What, Bob? We know that Bob is answering him, and we know that Chris is still in that back and forth. And then once somebody new comes in, we have to clarify it. So Jimmy, right? And then we know that Jimmy's talking to Bob because he touched the man's shoulder. Nah, I promise you. Okay. And because Richard, this is a transition. Richard is the focal point, right? What people are looking at now. The camera shift to Richard. Okay. So we establish specific goals. They have to get the blah 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 sword to take care of Bloop Bloop. But the conversation isn't really about the blah 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 sword or Bloop Bloop. It's what they're gonna do, because they all have different positions. They're all different characters. They all have different wants, right? And the dialogue reflects their motivations. We incorporated some physical descriptions as far as and we could probably go deeper too. The thing is, like, Dave stepped to the table, and then slamming his horse such. Then he said, looking over to Richard, who remains. Wait, where's oh, he wiped his face. Taking a gulp of his mead, Chris wiped his mouth, though wiped what he could from his mouth. All the rest absorbed into his black beard. Well, Bob. Okay. So that's something you could do. Like when you're writing, you could pause and sort of go back. And just because you wrote it doesn't mean you can't adjust it. You could start adding some descriptors. You could clean up, like I did. Sitting, he slouched. Like, you don't have to write there, right? You could just say slouched in his chair. So you can add some clarity. I'm sure there's other things I could do to this. I could definitely go through it and rework things, whatever the case may be. But all right, there we go. All right, so let's get to. I think we're on final thought. Yeah, final thought. All right. Crafting group dialogue that feels engaging is all about ensuring each character has a unique purpose and presence, making their actions, desires, and contributions speak louder than words. Now, you want to keep the reader focused and allow the characters to draw them through the experience of the characters and their choices, because that becomes the story. Because the plot of that scene is ultimately what? They have to get the sword, the blah 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 sword, and to kill Bloop Bloop. And then the plot is that they are going to go do it. The plot dictates that they're going to go do it, and the plot dictates they got to get that sword. But they're having the back and forth of, are they, or will they, won't they, who will, who won't, what are their feelings? All that is what makes the story of a narrative. Now, writing group conversations is an opportunity for you to explore the complex dynamics between these characters, allowing them to push back. But you don't want it to be, if you notice, the dialogue that I just wrote doesn't meander on other things. Yeah, he says, I'm thinking of my kids, whatever, right? So even in that moment, wait, where is it? I miss my kids, that's all. Right? It's not detracting, because it's recognizing their motivations or position, but then a character directly is like, well, you don't have to go. And he's like, no, I already promised I would go. So it's still in the flow of the scene's needs. But if I had gone, well, it's my kids, I just missed them. And then if the character started going, little Bobby, he's going to be in school. He's leaving for college soon, and I want to wish him off and see him goodbye. I want to, right? Like, if it starts like going into that, and the conversation becomes about the kids, it's spending word count, and it's not doing anything because the story, or I should say the narrative, is not about the kid going to school and this character dealing with the kid going to school. The narrative is, if I wanted to write that, I would have chose to focus on that character, right? But the narrative is in this situation is about getting the sword and stopping Bloop Bloop. Okay, so you have to always think of the long term. However, that is a subplot that is happening, that they miss their kids, and yeah, maybe it does come up where it's like, oh, it's just my kid, I missed him. He's going off to college, but I already promised I would do this. So now it's not really a part of the story. We don't need to really focus on it. So you got to keep it going. But you can do a lot of character development and a lot of movement with characters still within a scene and remain focused on the movement of that scene. All right. I would also say don't be afraid to think outside the box. You want to challenge the traditional ways characters might interact. You can try things. It's okay. Just because it's a familiar environment to have them in a tavern doesn't mean they have to be in a tavern. Just because it's familiar that they're drinking doesn't mean they have to be drinking. I obviously wrote characters that are in a fantasy world. They don't have to be in a fantasy world. You do want to experiment, though, with unique motivations. Figure out what their character motivations are. One thing I really like doing when I'm working on my fantasy novels is even the villains or the antagonists, the antagonistic forces, they're human beings with real lives. They all have some sort of life going on. And I know just enough that I can allow that to be a part of their dialogue or their motivations. It's important. It's important to have characters have these depths. So these unique motivations, what might appear as one thing to the audience being revealed as another thing is interesting. So there you go. That's it. Next video in the series, internal monologue, incorporating internal monologue to reveal a character's thoughts and feelings. Question: how do you personally approach writing a group conversation? Do you have a particular strategy that helps you keep your scenes engaging and clear? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We always love learning. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. And remember to like the video. It helps a lot. Anyway, I guess that's it. Keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.